Tonight on First Tuesday, joyriding, the most dangerous game in town.
It's not like having a crash and then talking about it the next day, thinking that you could have been killed. You know, just think or getting shot at.
And the enduring use of tranquillisers in our mental hospitals. They call it liquid Cosh.
If we had the temerity to refuse them, we got them injected into us. So there was no escape.
Good evening. A change to our second item tonight. We had intended to show you our investigation into bed and breakfast conditions in Oxford, but the late intervention of a criminal court case means that we must postpone that film. But first, joyriding. Stealing cars for kicks is a dangerous racket anywhere, but in West Belfast, in the middle of the ongoing battle between paramilitaries and security forces, it can be suicidal. This wasn't the easiest programme to make. The RUC didn't want to take part, and government restrictions mean that a Sinn Féin councillor interviewed has his voice dubbed by an actor. But then Belfast isn't the easiest place to live, as we hear from those who trifle with their own and other people's lives in Driven to the Limit.
I got a name for myself through it. A joyrider, a hood, an animal, a thief.
It's a bit like smoking. Once you take a cigarette, it's like taking a car. You want another one and another one.
In England, for instance, where people steal cars, the big difference is that over there, the kids don't get shot at. But here, the kids will be shot at and killed.
Joyriders take half the vehicles stolen each year in Northern Ireland. Last year, 3,000 cars were dumped in West Belfast. It's been a craze for 20 years, beyond police or paramilitary control. And in Belfast, there's more than just the risk of the jaunt ending in a crash. Joyriders risk being shot at by the security forces, being kneecapped by the provisionals. Yet the craze starts young.
When I was about 11, I was more into going to discos and stuff, and I was a punk rocker at the time. But I got barred for life when I was 11 from a youth club. So that left me out standing on the street. The older boys then, who were stealing cars, so just basically fell in with that group of people. Flying up and down the road, having fun. It was the start of it.
I would steal a car whenever I feel like stealing one. When I want money, I'll just go out and take a car. So, a screwdriver can steal you any card you want, practically. It's our fault they're making the steering's too easy to break. They make the ignitions too easy to tackle with. You know, I remember years ago you couldn't hardwire a car. You could have hardwired it, but you had a big bundle of wires. Now it's down to 2 or 3 wires. So it is. Starts a car. You know, it's all practically a slagging match. Let's go, lads, out for a car. It's more of a competition at the end of the night to see who does come back first.
This here's Kennedy Way. It's known locally by the joyriders who use it as Brands Hatch. I've seen 13 cars in this stretch of road in one night, just racing each other up and down, and you can see it's just like a racing corner with them big bricks and all there. You know, it has the stripes and all on them. And a few races on it myself.
You have to get yourself an aim as a good driver at the end of the day.
You like people coming up and saying to you, I seen you last night, that was some motor or something you had last night, you know, things like that there.
You take an SRI Cavalier, you know, you pull about 120 out of one. And then you take an Audi Quattro or something, you're probably pulling 130, 135. You always like to see it, you can get the speed out of the car. I love the old chase from my pillars, getting away from it, and then going back to the house and just lying, thinking about it.
Probably be doing around about 80 to 90 mile an hour coming down here. Got chased a few times. If you do get chased, you get into the estates, and you usually would get about 3 streets in front of them, and just leave the car and get out and run, because the police won't follow you. Well, we're coming up to Turf Lodge. This is all part of the racing track as well, and you know, here you would basically, you wouldn't race as much because people would throw bottles and bricks at you. But when they do that there, what the wheel lads usually do is start handbraking and spinning the wheels just to annoy them. And you can see by the road that they've been heavily into it, either last night or the night before.
The risk is from the time that they come together to go into the town, or normally into the better class areas of Belfast, to take the car with a screwdriver in their pocket. Do they get that motor, take a chance on driving through what is probably the most heavily policed area in Western Europe, going through the roadblocks, the crashes, the shootings and the possibility of shootings from the security forces, but also from elements within their own community.
Since 1980, the security forces have shot dead 7 joyriders. Almost 2,000 youths have been kneecapped, beaten and shot by the paramilitaries. Each week claims a new victim.
15 vehicles have been seized and set alight in Belfast. Gunmen opened up at Divis, Beachmount and New Barnsley in 4 hours of violence, but no one was injured.
Saturday night and the familiar catalogue of hijackings. By midnight, joyriders are out on their regular racetrack, White Rock Road.
Downtown News at 7 a.m. This is Patricia Wilkinson. West Belfast has returned to normal after another night of street violence. Most routes are now passable, although several are still littered with the remains of hijacked vehicles which were set alight by gangs of youths.
Around the corner from the burnt-out buses, the remains of last night's joyriding.
Most of it is up yours, with people harassing you. You'll take it into your head, go out for a car and harass them and back in your way.
When I started working with young joyriders about 10 years ago, trying to develop ways that were going to be effective in changing their behaviour, one of the things that annoyed me at the time was that they actually didn't seem to care about the people they were hurting. And then I began to realise that that wasn't just a difficulty, it was actually more worrying than that the young people, in fact, didn't even care about themselves.
It's not like having a crash and then talking about it the next day, thinking that you could have been killed. You know, just think or getting shot at.
A youth has been seriously injured in Northern Ireland after a soldier fired on a stolen car. The incident happened in the early hours of this morning. With more details, here's Mervyn Jess in Belfast.
A stolen Astra car was being driven along the Twinbrook Road on the outskirts of Belfast about 4 o'clock this morning when it approached a joint army-police checkpoint. The security forces tried to stop the car, but it sped through the checkpoint, striking one of the soldiers. Another soldier fired a shot at the vehicle, which came to a halt about 200 yards away. When the police and army reached the car, they discovered a youth inside with a gunshot wound to the back. The injured youth was taken to hospital, where his condition is described as serious but stable.
Today, a Belfast mother is making an all too familiar visit to the hospital. Of her 4 children, 3 have been involved in joyriding, and all 3 have been shot. In 1985, 2 sons were shot by paramilitaries. Then the eldest was shot in the back by security forces. Now another has been shot for the 2nd time.
I don't know what damage they have done, for a fact that they'd pulled him out, they'd roughed him up a bit before they'd realised that they had shot him in the spine.
I can't sit up that much, and I can move, but no, if I'm on my back, well, can't. If I go to sit up, I fall back down again. I can only bend my toes so far. I can only lift it so far before it starts hurting me in my back. And it's numb, more or less, down from my knee down.
The oldest son, he was shot 4 or 5 years ago, and he knew that if he'd been caught in a stolen car, he would have been put away. And he'd got out and run away, and it was a soldier had shot him. And he was shot through the back, and then the bullet came out the front of his chest. His lung was punctured, the heart muscle was hit, the spleen, the pancreas, stomach. You know, a lot of injuries, a terrible lot. And thank God he came through it. He was in intensive care for about 3 weeks, but he survived it. It was an awful hard lesson to learn, but a lesson that was well learned. Hopefully this time good will come out of evil. I have seen mothers whose sons have been killed joyriding, and I've always feared that. I've always feared them being shot. It's frightening.
It's good at the time, but when you're in hospital, you get time to think about it. I suppose it'd be hard, like, when I get out to stop. That's only here. Hopefully this time I will stop.
There certainly is an element of the troubles involved in the fact that Catholic West Belfast has a joyriding problem. Young people were used to hijack cars for quite considerable periods of time, I mean, running 2, 3, and 4 years. And at the time when that was necessary from the political point of view of people in this community, the young people were encouraged to do it, and in many ways were seen as the local heroes.
Oh yeah, there was cars brought in that used for barricades. So it was stolen cars, still is during rats. The hoods would go out, bring their cars in, throw them on top of the barricades in it, to block off the streets. They were saying they'll go out and get a car, come back and throw it this street and that street. But at the end of the day, it was all fun to me. So it was.
When it became clear that they were continuing to do it, and that they were not only questioning the authority of the state or the state forces in doing that, but also the authority of the paramilitary groups in the community. For the community, it's seen probably as the major difficulty involving young people. It's a very high-profile activity. The response to the young people is the ongoing one of punish, get them out, lock them up, shoot them.
Angry residents in a West Belfast estate are calling for tougher action against joyriders. They claim youths are nightly staging races along a busy road, endangering the lives of local people. And they've accused security forces of failing to halt the spiralling car thefts in the city.
The call for action is not directed at the police, but Sinn Féin. West Belfast remains the Sinn Féin constituency, where many feel that the RUC has failed to stop joyriding.
And I don't think that they tried to stop them at all, because again, you would have many eyewitness accounts of people within this area who would tell you that on a number of occasions the RUC would be very nearby when joyriding incidents are taking place, or when cars have been stolen, and they have not certainly gone out of their way to stop it.
You have the provies, they come hunt us, the kneecap us, they do other things, tortures, beat us with sledgehammers, breeze block us.
I would like to say to the young people, look, you have to realise that your activities, when they are persistent and when they are dangerous to the community around you, you're inflicting further hardship on the community. And you must realise that the community has demanded that your activities are stopped.
I was kneecapped in 1987, 13th of May. It's a hard thing to forget, like. Happened down towards that way there in Spring Hill. So it did. I was walking along, a guy approached me, put a gun to me, turned around and says to me, "You're under arrest. Provisional IRA, you're getting a punishment shooting." I looked, couldn't argue with the gun, so I just lay down. It was all over pretty quickly. I was shot, both legs, one ankle, and the gun jammed. Then I ended up in hospital, which made me end up with very severe scars till my legs. There's still one that's a bit open. There's that one there, and then there's in there where the bullet went in, and they ripped the arteries out, and the nervous system, and the part of the Achilles tendon went on it. It's painful. You can't really walk as far as you want to walk. You have to sit and take rest all the time. So you have. Still need more operation in my foot. It's one of these things in life, it had to happen. That's what it is. I was a joyrider. I took the consequences for it. That's what it is.
I had 2 shot punishment shootings. One was shot in the knees and the other one was shot in the ankles. And one of them, it happened while I was within hearing distance of him, and I just couldn't believe it when you have to tie your own child's legs up to stop the flow of blood.
But there's a whole, if you like, phenomenon of like a car theft industry almost, where people are careering around, they're persistent offenders, and it's only in that situation that these people find themselves being punished. It's regrettable, but I think under the circumstances within this area that it's unavoidable.
We continually say that we understand the anger of the community, and the anger is justifiable. We do not have any justification for the vent that anger in terms of injuring seriously our young people. Not only does it not work, it doesn't act as a deterrent to others, and in fact it is counterproductive. I remember going to the wake, the laying out of a young person who had been shot in the head by the provisionals at this stage. And I saw all his mates knocking around, about 30 or 40, sitting in with him in his coffin, having been shot dead for antisocial behaviour, planning what they were going to do to get their own back. I've seen young people, one for instance who had been shot and had his leg taken off above the knee, who was out after he came from a hospital with a crutch pushing down the clutch in the motor. I've seen young people who have been lying in hospital seriously injured coming out and again needing to engage in that behaviour to prove that they weren't afraid.
Because there's people trying to put you down as scum of the earth by shooting you. So they are. But you want to try and keep your reputation up as a joyrider. You want to more or less get back at the ones that done it. So you do. You know, more or less, it's just sort of a buzz after. Will I get in this stone car, will I not? You know, It's all on your attitude of it. So it is. Whether you're scared, whether you've still got the balls for it, and things like that.
Young people who are presenting criminal, antisocial or difficult behaviour in West Belfast are caught between a hard thing and a rock. On the one hand, you have the anger of the community been expressed through punishment, shootings or beatings. And at the other level, you have the forces of the state, whose main concern is dealing with political crime as they see it. The young person is arrested for a criminal offence. He is pressurised, and we know there have been attempts to bribe young people by dropping charges or by straight offering of money to actually act as informers.
This 17-year-old Catholic was a regular joyrider for 3 years. He was arrested by the RUC and says he was asked to inform on his community.
Told me that they had a charge on me, which I was charged with, and that they were going to remand me on it. And they says, well, if you go informer, you'll be released. All you have to do is meet me here and tell me what's been happening.
I'm not saying that's a habit that all police engage in, but we know quite clearly that certainly the special branch use young people to become informers, providing low-level information on Republican groups.
I got beat up a bit too. They try to get you to break to see what you'll say. I've heard it happen a lot with different people. You just know, don't say nothing. I went to the newspapers and that and published it.
He is caught between the security forces and the paramilitaries. Suspected of being an informer, he had to live outside Northern Ireland until he could clear his name.
I was under threat from the paramilitaries. I had to get out the road. It was either come over here or stay and get shot. And I just didn't want to get shot.
Then at the end of the day, it's only you. You can stop it. Nobody else. Should it be probation officers, courts? Nobody. Police? Nobody will stop us.
I went through the courts, I'm through probation, and then out of jail 4 times, and it just did no good at all.
It's very hard when it comes to your door the first time, you know, and you get them over that and you say, that's great, that's it over, till it comes the second time, and then the third and the fourth, and it gets beyond control.
Increasing numbers are actually choosing criminal career. And in their terms, that is a good option because there are no other options economically or in terms of their identity as people.
There was never anything for me in my life, for self-joyriding, you know. It's more or less shapsy when you're going for a job too. Have you a criminal record? You can't turn around and say no. Can you get a driving licence? No. An employer doesn't want somebody that's well known in the community, it's a vandal, a hood.
It's very hard to give it up because you're not just giving up stealing cars, you're giving up your friends, and just to turn around and say no, I don't want to go out with you no more. It's not that easy to do, so it's not. I stole cars for about 4 years and got involved in a workshop place where they actually fixed cars and stuff, and I got a chance to go stock car racing, so it was like the excitement but legal. I'm still able to drive, I still can race and stuff. Only now I can't go to jail for it, so I can't.
Things have worked out well for me, you know. I mean, I've got out with all my limbs intact without being shot. I got the same sort of buzz from it. Your nerves is going, your hands is going. You're just hoping that there isn't a faster car behind you.
You would take a lot of cars as being pillars chasing you. Put that in your head, you just fly.
Can I help you? Just run off the road.
Shorty works part-time for YouthLink, funded by the Probation and Social Services to help young people in trouble with the law.
We spend a fair period of time working with them to get them to realise that if somebody else believes they're worth caring about, that they'll begin to believe that they're worth caring for also.
You got out before it came to your time?
I got out when the going was good. it does take a brave while for you to be reaccepted back in the community, but it's worth it.
Bad habits are hard to kick.
I know, but it's when they catch up on you.
Do you think that money you're losing out in the end, like? I mean, when you're stealing around motors, like, you've always a few pound in your pocket.
I know you have, like, but is it the risk?
While Shorty channels his energies into working at YouthLink, Jim has been convicted of car theft again and placed on community service.
I suppose it's more the hard man thing. So it is. More or less to be a hard man in the scene. But at the end of the day, you're not a hard man, you're just a silly man. So you are. Kids try to follow you, they try to be a hard man. It's alright, somebody that's had a full life, maybe at the age of 23 or 24 down the car. They've lived their life. I don't like to see kids joyriding. It's not really fair on our parents. But I suppose, like, it was the same as me in my day. It wasn't fair on my parents.
We have failed them. In many ways, we have given them no future. We haven't given them any identity in terms of what they do. And they're giving us that message. If I was 16, if I was living in West Belfast, I would be kicking as they do if I had any respect for myself. We still need to light candles rather than sit in the dark, wring our hands and say, shoot the wee bastards.
The reality, however, is that 2 of the young men interviewed have since been kneecapped for what the Provisional IRA has decided is antisocial behaviour. In a moment, as Britain's mental hospitals empty, what's the future for the chemical straitjacket of heavy tranquillisers? That's after the break. Welcome back. Our mental hospitals are being emptied. It's a policy decision which has sparked considerable debate about how well equipped the community is to care for the former patients. But what remains at the heart of treatment for many of the mentally ill is the use of tranquilizing drugs, officially administered drugs, which can be a double-edged sword. They can give the stability to hasten release, but they can be misused and have fearful side effects. They're a family of tranquilizers so strong that they're sometimes known as liquid Cosh.
Hello, darling.
The memories are starting to fade. It's more than 2 years since Jacob Eldridge's mother last came to the school gates. It's his granny who takes him home now. For Jacob's mother, Sharon, is dead.
Give me a kiss then.
One day, in July 1987, the doctors prescribed a massive cocktail of drugs in common use in the mental health service, and Sharon Eldridge died. Sharon Eldridge, a former heroin addict, had been found wielding a hacksaw blade and threatening to throw herself out of the window. When she was taken to Hastings Police Station, a psychiatrist and police doctor decided to confine her under the Mental Health Act to Queen Charlotte's psychiatric unit for up to 28 days.
She was sitting up in the bed, cross-legged, looking very beautiful and fit as a fiddle. And she was cross at being put there. She said, why I'm in this hospital. So I said, well, the social worker thought that you was pending a nervous breakdown, but you won't be here for very long.
During Kathleen Eldridge's visit, the doctor saw Sharon, who became very agitated. She pleaded with her mother to get her released. Next day, Mrs. Eldridge wanted to visit her again.
I asked to see my daughter, so they said that I couldn't. I wouldn't be allowed to see her for a week. She would be sedated. So I complained about this. I said that my daughter is only very slight, 5'3", and she couldn't stand a lot of sedation.
It was 4 days, in fact, before Kathleen Eldridge was allowed another visit to her daughter. It was Sharon's 24th birthday. By now, she was unable to speak.
Sharon was sedated. I sat on the bed. I rubbed her arms, talked to her, and I could get no response whatsoever. I argued with myself. I don't think she's all right. Her breathing seemed very shallow, and she was in a deep sleep. Next morning, about 9 o'clock, I suppose, the police knocked at the door. They said, "I'm sorry to tell you, Sharon died peacefully in her sleep last night."
At Sharon's inquest in April 1988, they found that her death was caused by the powerful tranquiliser chlorpromazine. The coroner's verdict, accidental death.
I was amazed that they brought it in as accidental death. I think that they should have brought in a verdict, open verdict. Here we are, Jacob. Happy birthday. Oops.
It's Jacob Eldridge's 6th birthday.
Steady. You lucky boy.
It's now been established that Sharon had not only been given more than the manufacturer's recommended maximum dose for chlorpromazine, but the maximum dose of another powerful drug, haloperidol, had also been prescribed, increasing the risk to Sharon's life.
Walkie-talkie.
When Sharon died, she joined a roll call of more than 100 whose deaths in the last 25 years have involved the same kind of drugs. 107 acknowledged deaths, yet these are not supposed to be dangerous drugs.
He used to ask where his mummy was with the long blonde hair. He's accepted that Mummy's gone to heaven, and one day he'll see her again.
As is common practice, the consultant in charge of Sharon never actually saw her. He prescribed the drugs by phone. Drugs so powerful that hospital staff sometimes call them liquid Cosh. For nearly 40 years, these tranquilizers have been standard treatment in our mental institutions and prison hospitals. But questions are now being raised about whether they're being used with sufficient care. Yet these same drugs have always had another use. Every day, mental patients who are not violent or distressed are given doses in the form of tablets or injections to treat illnesses like schizophrenia or manic depression. The mental hospitals are being emptied. It's the logical end to a drug revolution that began in the 1950s. Soon, the only patients who live behind these walls will be the acutely ill, the senile, the demented. For the rest, a routine of the same drugs that killed Sharon make them sufficiently manageable to be released into the community. The padded cells have become redundant. Where once it may have taken a straitjacket to control a violent schizophrenic, a chemical straitjacket has been created. A simple injection can suffice. The intervention is in the mind. The drugs are particularly effective in suppressing the distressing and perverse symptoms of acute mental breakdown and psychosis.
They have produced a dramatic improvement in more florid symptoms such as delusions, ideas that somebody wants to kill them or harm them in some way. That's a very common one. Hallucinations, distressing voices, abusing them, calling out, trying to control them.
So in a situation where somebody is extremely distressed, they certainly do tranquilize the person. Beyond that, there are no benefits whatsoever.
But now, as then, in hospital or out, patients routinely receive high and continuous doses of these drugs, often for years on end. And certainly the hospitals became much calmer than the madhouses of old. Bedlam had become manageable. But the medications, some critics argue, does no more than keep the patients quiet. Other mainstream psychiatrists are convinced the drugs also keep the illness at bay.
In the long term, they seem to have a powerful effect at protecting sufferers of schizophrenia from relapse.
But they are actually used to control a whole array of unacceptable behaviors, from unusual thoughts to extremes of feelings, and that's within the psychiatric sphere. But of course, they're also used very much outside of the psychiatric sphere, where it's quite blatant that it is social control. They're used in institutions for adolescents, they're used to a great extent in old people's homes, they're used in prisons.
In the mental hospitals through the 60s and 70s and into the 1980s, the drugs were viewed as a great success. They'd enabled many patients to leave hospital.
If we had the temerity to refuse them, we got them injected into us. So there was no escape. This is one of the things we're fighting for, which is choice. I had no choice. The other thing was that we noticed that the people who got more in the way of chemicals were the ones who appeared to be argumentative to the staff. So we knew very quickly that we had to play the game.
I was once told, you can only attend this day unit if you take these drugs. Now that's a very powerful thing to say to someone when they have no job, no friends, no social contact. And so I gave in. And I had this depot injection, and within 24 hours I changed from a bit of a zombie to a complete zombie. 2 friends stopped me in the street and asked, "Are you on heroin?"
I had admitted to somebody that I'd heard voices, and a great look of relief came over the psychiatrist's face at this point. Here we have a very easily identifiable symptom. I know which drugs this one has, and I was then on to sort of a further 8 years of major tranquilizers.
It was Monday morning, time to go to work. I just couldn't face any more of it. So what I did was I sort of curled up into a ball in bed. And my mother got alarmed and did what we're told to do, which is to phone the GP. I saw the GP, and the GP asked me what the problem was. I said to the GP that I need to be punished because I've stolen love without deserving it. Within 20 minutes, I was waiting outside a consultant psychiatrist's office.
Mike Lawson spent the next 6 years in and out of hospital on major tranquilizers. Not long ago, chlorpromazine and droperidol, trifluoroperazine and haloperidol were an integral part of every mental hospital's daily routine.
And what it does is stop you dead and put you in this wet blanket with your blurred vision and your inability to speak and your inability to act or move properly.
It made everything smaller.
Everything slowed down and like a film in slow motion, just sort of moving that slowly.
You get caught up inside this little inner world.
It feels like somebody's poured cold porridge into your brain, and it's actually in there interfering with every time you try and think. You can get halfway through a sentence and forget how you started it.
And your distress is there, but it is chained down with invisible chains. You're just chemically gagged.
The drugs not only affect feeling and perception, there are physical reactions too. Often the behavior that makes people look mad is the result of the drugs, not just the illness. Dribbling, tremors, rocking, blurred vision and rolling eyes, sensitive skin, problems with sexuality. 1 in every 20 experiences an effect known as acute dystonia.
It's in fact muscle spasms, and they tend to affect the head and neck. They'll twist the head on the shoulders, affect the tongue, the jaw, muscles of speech and eating, and also sometimes around the eyes, causing the eyes to blink tight shut.
I didn't know what the hell was happening to me, and it took me literally, and certainly was no joke, it took me literally 10 minutes to get about 10 paces to my phone to phone for help, because my body was completely out of my control. I was sort of tied up in knots.
Brian Davey had previously suffered just such an attack in hospital and assumed it was part of his illness. His distress had gone unnoticed. A more common and unpleasant side effect is akathisia.
You have the sensation that you would have if somebody pulled their fingernails down a blackboard and a kind of squirming inside. And the only way in which you can kind of cope with this squirming inside is like continually keeping on the move.
You see, the thing about side effects is I can't tell my body this is a side effect. You know, when I'm impotent, when I'm shaking, when I'm dribbling, it's really difficult for me to persuade my little brain and say, hey, that's okay, it's a side effect. It's a real effect. Sometimes it's the overall effect.
Doctors try to control some of the side effects with other drugs, but these too can be horribly unpleasant. But perhaps worst of all, any patient on long-term treatment with these tranquilizers risks getting an intractable condition called tardive dyskinesia.
Tardive means late, dys means disturbance of, and kinesia means movement. So it only means late onset movement disorder. But its manifestations are movements around the mouth, principally. Lip smacking, pursing of the lips, cheek puffing, jaw movements, chewing movements, that sort of thing. The trunk and limbs can be involved as well.
No one yet agrees on the risks of contracting tardive dyskinesia for people like these.
I wanted a body, retractment, Benjamin.
Most psychiatrists now accept that 1 in 5 patients taking these drugs will one day suffer from tardive dyskinesia. The more outspoken critics put the figure at over a half.
That's enough of joke. He's been joking me and all. Choked me before when I was inside. He did.
Most of the men and women here at Hewenden Lodge in Nottingham can be extremely disturbed and receive heavy medication. Until recently, they were permanently in locked hospital wards. But here, they're free to come and go as they please and have a bedroom to themselves. A manic depressive who's been in mental institutions for 15 years, Marion Dakin.
The chlorpromazine do help me. They make me feel calm and keep me steady. If I stop taking it, I just go high as a kite.
OK, Marion. Another week's supply of drugs.
Yeah, please don't.
OK. Chlorpromazine, 100 milligrams to be taken 3 times a day.
Yes.
And procyclidine.
Sometimes, if I don't take my procyclidine, my eyes tend to roll into the back of my head. And other times you get, like, table shakes. You just all of a tremor and shaking.
When you first were given chlorpromazine, did the doctor tell you about the drug?
Yes, he did. He explained it to me, that it was a tranquilizer, mild tranquilizer.
Did he tell you about the side effects?
Yes, he said that there would be slight side effects, such as the shakes, as I've already mentioned, and sometimes double vision or blurred vision.
There are now 100,000 fewer patients in our mental hospitals than there were when the drugs were first introduced. Most now fend for themselves.
There are difficulties in community care, a large part of which is to do with the lack of funding. It's very often the case in areas where community neglect is perhaps more appropriate as a description, that the only sort of care people with long-term mental illness receive is medication. What we're trying to do is to review people progressively, to look at the whole set of care and support they receive and medication in that context. There is some considerable evidence that where social circumstances are good, stress is minimised of certain sorts, that the medication can be appropriately reduced.
At a rehabilitation unit in Nottingham's Mapley Hospital, patients who are already living in the community come to learn the disciplines of work. At Mapley, they're actively seeking to reduce the levels of medication their patients receive. But there's a dilemma. A patient coming off the drugs completely stands a greater chance of their terrifying symptoms returning than someone who stays on the drugs. So most of these men and women are dependent on regular doses of the tranquilizers. Some have injections which last for 2 or 3 weeks. Others medicate themselves with tablets on a regular daily basis.
He's put me on 6 tablets at night time and 2 for breakfast, 2 for dinner, and then 6 at night time.
I'm on medication, yeah. Benzexol. One at breakfast and one at tea time.
Michael Cardew has spent 18 years in and out of mental hospital. He has tardive dyskinesia.
I've been arguing for a long time that I was being experimented on, and the psychiatrist never told me about the side effects. OK, they gave me side effect tablets, but they never told me about possible brain damage. Now, the tardive dyskinesia I suffer from is very mild. I just move my legs and might move my mouth a bit. But it's very mild. You know, it is possible it could get a lot worse. Now, I've seen people who are worse than me, and their heads jerk, and their whole body has spasms. And they get the shakes with their hands. And they appear mad, but they're not necessarily mad. They just appear mad because of this brain damage that's been caused by the drugs.
It's emerged in the psychiatric literature as long ago as 1959, just 3 or 4 years after the drugs were introduced. It was a well-kept secret as far as the public were concerned until a lot later. One of the major breakthroughs was in the United States when psychiatrists were first successfully sued for the irreversible brain damage that the drugs caused.
How is it that for about approximately 18 years I was taking these injections and I didn't know anything about it? I must have seen about 20 different psychiatrists and none of them mentioned it to me.
Very often they don't want to worry people. To the extent that I can understand at all why they don't, I think it must be because either they don't know, which was perhaps true 10, 15 years ago, but it's certainly not true anymore. They do know, and if they read their own research, they will know.
Are you saying the doctors didn't know about the brain damage that could be done?
I think they might have known that such a thing as tardive dyskinesia existed, but probably they thought it was just a few percentage of people who were on for a very long time. And now we know that that isn't the case, that you don't have to be on a long time on high dosage.
I think things are very gradually changing, and I think that's partly to do with because it's more of a user's voice about what you want to know, what you need to know in order to decide what happens to you.
I mean, Pat, what have you been told about the drugs are supposed to be for?
Just to calm me down.
To calm you down?
Because I used to shout in the street. I used to shout at Kentish Town as well.
You used to shout in the street?
Mm.
What were you shouting about?
Very different. You used to shout out car numbers, you used to shout out at people that they were to ask them to give me money, to give me a home in that, and I never had one.
You were shouting out in the street asking people to give you a home and to
give me a home
money.
and begging cigarettes and money, yes.
And because of that, they gave you pills to try and calm you down,
yes,
stop you shouting out
yes.
for a home and for money.
Yes.
For those sent out from the hospitals into the community, the world can be bleak. As many as 40% of London's destitute are or have been psychotic. Whether in hospital, at home or on the street, the same issue remains.
With all treatments in medicine, one has to balance the benefits against the adverse effects, and the antipsychotic drugs are no exception to that. One of the factors, of course, is how severe the illness is. You wouldn't use a drug with only a sort of mild benefit and severe side effects in a condition which in itself was not very serious.
I think GPs and psychiatrists are under tremendous pressure from society as a whole to fix almost any kind of emotional difficulty or any odd behaviour. And they simply don't have the tools to do it. They're trained medically, and these are 99% of the time not medical problems. It is not really fair to blame psychiatry for the dreadful mess that mental health services are in at the minute.
The mad are no longer locked in the institutions. Today, the patients can walk free. The locks are in the mind. No one doubts that the drugs relieve acute psychosis, but people are increasingly asking whether tranquilizing the mentally ill with high doses and sustained use is really the right approach. Indeed, we may soon look back at our free and easy use of liquid Cosh with as much horror and outrage as we now reserve for the Victorian loony bins with their barred windows and tortured souls.
My problems were real. They were embedded in my life, the way that I was conducting my life, the fact that I was isolated. Those things could be dealt with in a way that wouldn't leave me with chemical brain damage, that would leave me as a whole person. I'm a shadow of the person that I used to be.
The first-hand experience of liquid Cosh. Last month, we told the terrible story of the deaths of babies in Pakistan from Imodium poisoning. Many of you wrote to us and to the drugs manufacturers Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson now tell us that they're withdrawing Imodium drops throughout the world. Until next month, good night.